Amazing! 200 U.S. Marines versus 2,000 Japanese soldiers, the First Battle of Guadalcanal. It was the dead of night in August 1942. The air was thick with the smell of salt water and gunpowder. 200 young U.S. Marines stood shoulder to shoulder, gripping their rifles, staring into the black jungle ahead. Somewhere out there, 2,000 Japanese soldiers were closing in. The Marines knew the odds. They weren't just outnumbered, they were outgunned. But retreat? Not an option. This was the First Battle of Guadalcanal, a fight that would decide the fate of the Pacific. A fight where bravery would be tested and legends would be born. In this story, you'll witness a real battle where courage overcame fear, where sheer willpower clashed with overwhelming numbers, and where the human spirit proved unbreakable. Stay to the end, because what happened next shocked even the toughest veterans. The year was 1942, and the Pacific Ocean was a war zone. Japan's empire was growing fast, too fast. Island after island fell into their hands. But the island of Guadalcanal was different. Guadalcanal had something the Japanese needed desperately: an airfield. Whoever controlled it could dominate the skies and seas around the Solomon Islands. The United States knew they had to act, and fast. In August 1942, U.S. forces landed and took the unfinished airfield from the Japanese with minimal resistance. But taking it was one thing, holding it was another. The Marines guarding the airfield were just 200 strong. They were tired, low on supplies, and surrounded by dense jungle. Unknown to them, a force of 2,000 Japanese soldiers was already planning a night assault to take back the island. The Marines dug in, knowing help might not arrive in time. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the jungle began to whisper with the sounds of an approaching enemy. The sun had just set over Guadalcanal, painting the sky in deep orange and purple. A warm breeze rustled the palm leaves, but to the Marines, it wasn't peaceful. Every sound in the jungle felt sharper, every shadow seemed alive. The 200 Marines at the airfield had spent the day reinforcing their positions. Foxholes were dug deeper, barbed wire was stretched across choke points. Sandbags were stacked high around machine gun nests. Sergeant Red Henderson, a veteran with a voice like gravel, walked along the line checking weapons. "Keep your eyes open," he told the men. "They'll come when we least expect it." But some of the Marines did expect it. Private Jack Miller swore he heard faint rustling beyond the tree line, too steady to be the wind. Others noticed birds suddenly taking off, a sure sign that something was moving in the jungle. Hours crawled by. The night grew darker. The only light came from the moon, which cast long shadows over the airfield. Then a faint, distant sound. It was rhythmic, almost like footsteps, but multiplied by hundreds. The Marines froze. A few glanced at each other, eyes wide. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. From somewhere deep in the trees came the low, haunting sound of a Japanese war cry. It grew louder, joined by hundreds of voices. The Marines tightened their grips on their rifles. Henderson barked, "Positions now!" The airfield fell silent again for just a moment, and then, like a wave crashing onto the shore, 2,000 Japanese soldiers burst from the jungle. The First Battle of Guadalcanal had begun. The first gunshot shattered the silence. A Japanese soldier fell, but the rest kept coming, fast, screaming their war cries. The Marines opened fire. The crack of M1 Garands and the steady thump of Browning machine guns filled the air. Muzzle flashes lit up the night like lightning. Grenades exploded, sending palm leaves, dirt, and shrapnel into the air. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the heavy scent of the jungle. Private Miller ducked as a bullet whizzed past his ear. He popped up, fired twice, and saw a shadow collapse. But there was no time to think, only fight. The Japanese soldiers swarmed the barbed wire, cutting through it with bayonets and wire cutters. Some crawled under, others leapt over, charging straight into Marine foxholes. Hand-to-hand combat broke out. Rifle butts cracked skulls, knives flashed. Sergeant Henderson manned a machine gun, mowing down wave after wave, but the enemy kept coming. "Hold the line!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Mortar shells rained down, shaking the ground. Dirt and debris rained on the Marines, but they refused to give an inch. At one point, a group of Japanese soldiers flanked the Marines from the side. They crept through the tall grass, nearly invisible, until a Marine with a shotgun spotted them. One blast dropped the first man, and the rest scattered straight into a hail of gunfire. The fight became a blur of noise, flashes, and screams. Minutes felt like hours. Every Marine fought like the island's fate depended on him, because it did. The night dragged on, each wave of attackers more desperate than the last. The Marines' ammo was running low. Sweat stung their eyes. Hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. And yet they still held the airfield. The Japanese would have to break them or be broken themselves. By 2 a.m., the airfield looked like something out of a nightmare. Palm trees smoldered, craters pockmarked the dirt. Bodies, friend and foe, lay where they had fallen. The Marines were exhausted, almost out of ammunition. The Japanese soldiers, relentless and fearless, kept pushing forward. But Sergeant Henderson made a decision. We're not waiting for them to break us. We hit them now. Gathering a small group of Marines, Henderson led a surprise counterattack. They slipped out from behind the main line, moving silently along a shallow trench until they reached the Japanese flank. On Henderson's signal, they opened fire at point-blank range. The Japanese soldiers, caught completely off guard, fell into chaos. Some dove for cover, others fled deeper into the jungle. Meanwhile, at the main defense line, a young Marine named Corporal A.J. Alvarez manned a Browning machine gun despite a bleeding arm. Every burst bought his brothers more time. The Japanese regrouped for another push, but something had changed. Their momentum was broken. Their charges grew weaker, their movements more scattered. Then came a sound the Marines had been praying for, the distant roar of American aircraft engines. Just before dawn, a flight of Wildcats from the airfield's newly repaired runway soared overhead. The planes opened fire on the retreating Japanese, cutting off their escape. The surviving enemy forces vanished into the jungle, leaving behind weapons, gear, and their dead. The Marines had done the impossible. 200 men had held off 2,000 attackers. But as Henderson looked over the battered airfield, he didn't feel like cheering. Too many good men wouldn't see the sunrise. And yet, their sacrifice had bought the Allies a critical foothold in the Pacific. Guadalcanal would hold, for now. As the first rays of sunlight broke over Guadalcanal, the airfield stood in eerie silence. The jungle was still, but the ground bore the scars of the night. Spent shell casings, shattered helmets, and torn uniforms scattered across the dirt. The surviving Marines emerged from their foxholes, their faces pale from exhaustion, and their eyes red from smoke and strain. Some helped carry the wounded, others simply sat, staring at the horizon, trying to process that they were still alive. Sergeant Henderson walked the line counting heads. They had lost brothers, but against impossible odds, they had stopped the Japanese advance. 200 men had faced 2,000 and won. History would remember this as the First Battle of Guadalcanal. But for the men who fought it, it was more than a battle. It was proof that even in the darkest night, hope can survive. If this story moved you, remember, history is full of moments where ordinary people rose to extraordinary challenges. Subscribe to this channel and like for more true, untold battles that shaped our world. Thank you for watching.